Caroline, welcome to my channel. For this video I'd like to share with you this book, The Search for Tutankhamun by Nikki Horan. And this is a really interesting book because it's, well, I suppose it's a pop-up book in a way. So we'll have a look and I hope you enjoy. A real-life treasure hunt. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb at Egypt's Valley of the Kings in November 1922 made headlines around the world. In the depths of the tomb's underground chambers, covered in a thick layer of ancient grime, lay a wonderful 3,300-year-old treasure. There were weapons, regalia, jewellery, furniture, and the ancient king's personal possessions, all beautifully crafted from precious metals and gems, and untouched for thousands of years. This breathtaking collection is the richest treasure that has ever been found. The tomb's discovery instantly made Tutankhamun, or King Tut, a household name. Today, his riches are among the most recognised symbols of ancient Egypt. But Tutankhamun's tomb may have remained hidden had it not been for one man, Howard Carter. Without his passion and determination, the glorious treasures of Tutankhamun could have been lost forever, trapped under the shifting sands of Egypt. An English artist of modest means and limited education, Carter would eventually become one of the world's most celebrated archaeologists. His search for the tomb of Tutankhamun is one of the greatest real-life treasure hunts of all time. The story begins with 17-year-old Howard Carter setting sail for Egypt with his artist's tools stowed safely in the hold of a Mediterranean passenger liner. In late 1891, after being seen off by his father at Victoria Station in London, England, Carter crosses the English Channel on his way to Italy. Once there, he obtains passage on a ship to Alexandria, Egypt. Son of artist Samuel Carter, Howard Carter began drawing at an early age. In preparation for his trip to Egypt, young Carter spent several months at the British Museum studying and sketching the ancient pieces in its collection. These examples of Carter's illustrations from this time in Egypt show his great artistic ability. Carter goes to Egypt. Carter first travelled to Egypt in 1891. He had been sent by a British Exploration Society, which had recognised his artistic talent and employed him as an illustrator to record scenes and inscriptions in ancient Egyptian tombs. Within weeks of his arrival, Carter was sent to work with expert field archaeologist Flinders Petrie, who was digging at the ancient site of El Amarna. Petrie was very strict and particular in his methods of excavation. During the 4 months Carter spent with the older man, the diligent 17-year-old learnt much about how to excavate an archaeological site. By the end of his season at El Amarna, Carter was hooked. The thrill of uncovering the precious relics of an ancient civilization had set him on a new path for life as a field archaeologist. Carter illustrating a relief in a tomb at El Amarna. The great monuments of Egypt. Like all visitors to Egypt, Carter would have marvelled at the mighty structures of the ancient civilization. The magnificent Giza pyramids, the mysterious Great Sphinx, the breathtaking Abu Simbel and the mighty temples at Luxor and Karnak. These photographs from the 1800s show the monuments as they were when Carter first arrived in Egypt. The Great Sphinx, carved out of a limestone bedrock, is believed to be the first truly colossal statue created in ancient Egypt. Abu Simbel houses two temples here. A man is perched on one of the four 25-meter-high statues of Egyptian King Ramses II at the front of the principal temple. This entrance to the Temple of Luxor was, in ancient times, guarded by 6 huge statues of Ramses II. Since the 1800s, 2 of these have been restored. Inside the enormous Karnak temple complex, each side of this avenue is guarded by a row of ram-headed sphinxes. Carter meets Lord Carnarvon. After Carter left Al Amarna, he worked at the site of Deir el-Bahri for a number of years. Although not university trained, he quickly developed a reputation as a fine excavator, a good manager of excavation teams, and a competent speaker of Arabic. In 1899, at the age of 25, Carter's hard work was recognized when he was appointed Chief Inspector of Antiquities by the Egyptian government. In this role, Carter became responsible for protecting ancient monuments and supervising and conducting his own excavations on behalf of the government. For the first few years, Carter was assigned to the region of Luxor, the home of one of the busiest sites in Egypt, the Valley of the Kings. At this time, the concession to dig up the valley was held by wealthy American Theodore Davis. Over the course of around 10 years, his team uncovered more than 30 tombs and a number of curious artifacts inscribed with the name Tutankhamun. Davis is presumed that the rubbish pit containing some of these items was in fact the burial site of Tutankhamun, although no body was found. Carter was involved in some of Davis's digs and soon became fascinated with the site. After Carter left his government post, he met Lord Carnarvon, a wealthy British collector. Carnarvon was looking for a learned man to direct his digs, and Carter became that man. Over the following years, the two formed a close relationship as they worked a number of sites. With Carnarvon as financier and Carter as field director, though both Carter and Carnarvon were keen to dig at the Valley of the Kings, they were forced to wait until the concession was available. The opportunity finally came in late 1914, when Davis, in ill health, gave up his concession, declaring, "The Valley of the Tombs is now exhausted." Entry into Egypt, year 1905, 1906, 1907. Name George Edward Stanhope Molyneux Herbert, 5th Earl of Carnarvon. Male, date of birth 26th of June 1866. Age at time of arrival in Egypt 39 years old. Country of origin England. Parents Henry Howard Molyneux Herbert, 4th Earl of Carnarvon, and Lady Evelyn Stanhope. Occupation former race car driver, now injured. Damaged lungs require a warm climate year-round, the main reason for his stay in Egypt. Business in Egypt, collector of Egyptian antiquities. Former visit to Egypt, yes, 1903. a scholarly pursuit with all the excitement of a gold prospector's life. Lord Carnarvon's description of the appeal of archaeological digs. Carter and Carnarvon examining newly uncovered artifacts on the balcony of Carnarvon's residence in Egypt, the lavish Winter Palace Hotel, Luxor. During this period, the guest list of the hotel read like a who's who of the world's rich and famous. Digging for Tutankhamun, 1917 to 1922. It may seem strange that after Davis had declared the site exhausted, Carter wanted to dig at the Valley of the Kings, but unlike Davis, Carter did not believe that Tutankhamun's tomb was a rubbish tip. Rather, Carter saw the few artifacts bearing the name Tutankhamun as clues to the existence of an undiscovered royal tomb that lay somewhere nearby. To most archaeologists, these clues alone would not be enough to undertake an expensive and time-consuming excavation, especially at a site that had already been excavated for many years. But Carter was a passionate man of stubborn will. In 1917, with his concession to excavate at the valley approved and Carnarvon's sponsorship assured, Carter began his search for the tomb in earnest. Carter had made note of the most likely spots and decided these areas must be dug all the way down to the bedrock to make sure nothing was missed. It was a huge job requiring thousands and thousands of tons of rubble to be shifted. For 4 disappointing years, his team excavated with little success. At the end of the 1921-22 season, Carnarvon advised he could no longer afford to finance the dig. But the determined Carter was not about to quit. He told Carnarvon he would finance one final season himself. Carnarvon relented and reluctantly agreed to pay for one last season at the valley. Carter's team excavating at the Valley of the Kings. Carter's excavation team was made up of hundreds of Egyptian men and boys. Limestone rubble was shifted in baskets on one of the hand-propelled Decauville Railway. Carter oversaw extra stage of the excavation process at the valley. Carter checks his map while supervising his team as they clear a small area at the Valley of the Kings, right down to the limestone bedrock. The discovery of the tomb. At 10 o'clock on Saturday morning, 4th of November 1922, the 3rd day into the final season, a thrilling discovery was made. The top step of a staircase was discovered about 4 meters below the entrance to the tomb of Ramses V. This location was, in fact, the first spot Carter started excavating in 1917. But there hadn't been enough time in the first season to complete the job. Then, in following seasons, his efforts had been focused on other areas at the valley. For the final season, Carter decided to return to this area and complete its excavation. It was an excellent decision. On discovering the step, an excited Carter immediately worked with his team to clear the staircase. By the end of the day, they had uncovered 12 steps leading to a mysterious plastered wall stamped with ancient seals. Though Carter must have been bursting to see what lay behind the wall, he restrained himself from excavating any further. Indeed, he instructed his team to refill the staircase. The following day he sent an urgent telegram informing Lord Carnarvon, who was in England, of the exciting discovery. When Lord Carnarvon and his daughter arrived at Luxor on the 23rd of November, Carter took them down to the site immediately. By the following afternoon, the blocked entrance had been cleared. 3 days later, when the 8-metre corridor that lay behind the wall had been cleared, Carter and his colleagues were faced with another sealed entrance. 21st November 1922, Lord Carnarvon, Evelyn Herbert arrive at Luxor. After removing the first sealed doorway and clearing the underground corridor, Carter, Carnarvon and the team are faced with a mysterious second sealed doorway. The exclusive moment has arrived. To the left of the tomb's entrance, Carter placed a small placard with the two intertwined C's of Carter and Carnarvon. Entering the ancient tomb. It was in the late afternoon of the 27th of November 1922 that Howard Carter finally peered inside the tomb he had spent 5 long years searching for. That night he recorded the special moment in his diary. The antechamber was the first room of the tomb, filled with 3 large ritual couches, only one pictured here, plus many chests and boxes. It also contained the separate pieces of 4 golden chariots. Candle tests were applied as a precaution against foul gases, and then, widening the hole a little, I unscented the candle and peered in. At first I could see nothing. But presently, as my eyes grew accustomed to the light, details of the room within emerged slowly from the mist. Strange animals, statues, and gold. Everywhere the glint of gold. For the moment I was struck dumb with amazement, and when Lord Carnarvon, unable to stand the suspense any longer, inquired anxiously, "Can you see anything?" It was all I could do to get out the words, "Yes, wonderful things." Burial chamber. Behind a sealed wall in the antechamber, guarded by 2 royal figures, were the tomb's hidden burial chamber, its walls covered with wonderful ritual paintings. The contents of this room were originally fitted in a Russian doll-style arrangement of 4 shrines, the stone sarcophagus, 3 coffins, and the royal mummy. This picture shows the stone sarcophagus and the innermost coffin made of solid gold. Tutankhamun's tomb. The tomb is about 20 metres underground. Like the other tombs at the site, it was cut out of the solid limestone bedrock of the valley. The tomb is made up of 4 main rooms: the antechamber, the annex, the treasury, and the burial chamber. Archaeologists believe these chambers were not originally intended for a royal tomb, but when King Tutankhamun died unexpectedly, they were hastily prepared for the king's burial. The tomb's treasures. Carter's discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb is one of the most spectacular finds ever. The tomb's treasures are truly priceless, and not just because the collection is made up of hundreds and hundreds of lavishly decorated and beautifully crafted pieces. The tomb was unique, unlike other royal tombs, which had been heavily robbed in ancient times. Tutankhamun's tomb had lain virtually undisturbed for more than 3,300 years. As a result, it is the most complete royal Egyptian collection ever found, and among its splendid treasures were many rare and never before seen ancient objects. The closest we can get to travelling back in time to understand the daily lives of the ancient Egyptian kings is by looking at the treasures of Tutankhamun. They are frozen in time. Each and every item is an artifact of ancient Egypt and can tell us something about this ancient civilization. And his is the most complete royal tomb ever found. It is Tutankhamun's treasures, above those of all the other Egyptian kings, which can present us with the clearest snapshot of what life was like in ancient Egypt all those thousands of years ago. Carter thought the life-size, armless torso might be a tailor's dummy used for fitting and sizing the young king's new clothes. Though ancient illustrations show Egyptian royals dressed in well-fitting costumes, this is the only mannequin ever found. The fan would have to have held 30 ostrich feathers. Shading the king from the scorching heat of the desert, this travelling canopy was probably covered in shade cloth. This silver trumpet was probably used for fanfares and military calls. This cow couch was one of the magnificent ritual couches found in the antechamber. When Carter was Chief Inspector of Antiquities, he introduced electric light to the valley. Here he sets up a light in the antechamber of Tutankhamun's tomb in preparation for inspecting the tomb's contents. Personal possessions of Tutankhamun. Before the discovery of his tomb, little was known about Tutankhamun. What was known was that he lived more than 3,300 years ago and became the king of Egypt when he was only 9 years old. He ruled for around 10 years, 1336 to 1327 BC, and during his reign the peace and wealth of the empire had been maintained. Now, with the discovery of his tomb, Carter was able to piece together a clearer picture of the young king. The tomb held many of Tutankhamun's personal possessions. These very special artifacts help us to understand more about Tutankhamun the king and Tutankhamun the boy. Decorated with green leather and lined with gold. Made of wood. Of the nearly 100 pairs of shoes found in the tomb, the design of this pair is particularly interesting. They illustrated Asiatic and Nubian enemies were designed to be trodden under the king's feet. Inside a nest of miniature coffins found in the treasury was this lock of hair. The inner coffin bore the name Tai. Tai is thought to have been Akhenaten's mother. This lock is possibly the hair of Tutankhamun's grandmother. Tutankhamun is believed to have been the son of Akhenaten, a famous king who ruled Egypt between the years 1352-1336 BC. The statue is from Karnak. Found inside the burial chamber, this superb piece is thought to be Tutankhamun's cosmetic box. When it was found, it contained a foul-smelling powder, which 3,300 years earlier might have been a scented cosmetic ointment. This is the remarkable lid of a box found in the treasury. The box is thought to have been used by the king on special occasions to store changes of jewellery. When found, it contained many pieces, including the lovely necklace under the lid. The reign of Tutankhamun. The abundance of gold and other precious metals in the tomb indicate the great wealth of Egypt at the time of Tutankhamun. The era of Tutankhamun's reign, the New Kingdom, was the true golden age of Egypt. Pact for the afterlife. It was customary in ancient Egypt to bury the deceased with some of their possessions, as well as with some special ritual objects. This practice reflected their beliefs about what happened to a person when they died. The ancient Egyptians believed in a place called the afterlife, where a deceased person could live on forever. In order for this to occur, certain rituals, such as mummifying the body and burying the deceased with funerary items, had to be followed. Even the poorest Egyptians tried to observe these rules when burying their loved ones, but only the kings of Egypt could afford lavish burials filled with splendid funerary goods. Every single piece of treasure in Tutankhamun's tomb had a spiritual purpose. Some pieces, such as his furniture, chariots, and regalia, were packed for eternity. These were intended to travel with the king so he could have all the comforts of home in his new life in the afterworld. Other items in the tomb, the statues of gods and magic-charged amulets, were ritual funerary pieces, which allowed the young king to make a safe journey from life to afterlife. In Tutankhamun's tomb, Carter uncovered some of the finest examples of Egyptian ritual objects ever found. Similar to good luck charms, amulets were thought to be charged with magical powers. Many amulets like this one were found all around the tomb. The Canopic Shrine. It is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen anywhere. It was so wonderful we all came out dazed. Arthur Mace describes seeing the Canopic Shrine for the first time. Inside the burial chamber. For the first few months after opening the tomb, Carter and his team worked through the contents of the antechamber and annex. It wasn't until 17th of February 1923 that Carter started removing a wall in the antechamber, protected on both sides by statues of royal guards. Working quickly to remove this wall, Carter was soon faced with the doors of a beautiful golden shrine, which was the first of 4. Behind the doors of the 4th shrine was a carved stone sarcophagus. Inside the sarcophagus, under 2 wooden coffins, was a breathtaking 3rd coffin made of solid gold. And at the very centre of the Russian doll-style layering of 4 shrines and 3 coffins was the most wonderful treasure of all, the precious 3,300-year-old mummy of King Tutankhamun, safely packed for his trip to the afterlife. Inside the 4 golden shrines lay the quartzite sarcophagus containing a nest of 3 coffins, the outer coffin, the inner coffin, and the innermost coffin. The Book of the Dead. Inside the burial chamber, inscribed on the back of Tutankhamun's golden death mask, and inside the walls of the golden shrines, were chapters from the Book of the Dead. The Book of the Dead was an illustrated collection of formulas that were said to be guaranteed the survival of the deceased into the afterlife. It included a number of tests that the deceased needed to pass to avoid eternal torment. Chapters from the Book of the Dead were a common part of Egyptian burials, often appearing on papyrus scrolls buried with the deceased or on the walls of royal tombs. Covered in gold sheet and inscribed with the ancient text, this is the second of the 4 golden shrines. The mummy of Tutankhamun. When the lid of the magnificent golden coffin was removed, Carter saw Tutankhamun's mummy lying at the bottom of the coffin, wrapped in a linen cloth held in place with golden bands. On the mummy's head was a beautiful golden death mask. Under the bands, linen and mask, lay the mummified body of the young king. Around 20 amulets were found among the mummy wrappings, including this pair of gold vultures. With great care, the unwavering patience, Carter works to clean the solid gold innermost coffin which holds the mummy of Tutankhamun. The embalming and mummification of the body were important parts of preparing the burial of ancient Egyptians, designed to preserve the body for the afterlife. This 2-stage process involved a number of steps. The boy king's death. The first autopsy of the king's body was undertaken in November 1925 by Douglas Derry. Howard Carter was present at the event and oversaw the unwrapping of the mummy. It was a slow process as the embalming resins had caused the body and mask to stick to the inside of the inner coffin. But within a few days, the body had been revealed. From his examination, Derry determined that the king was around 17 or 19 years old when he died. Much to Carter's disappointment, however, Derry was unable to offer any explanation for the king's course of death. This issue has been a source of debate for many years. Did Tutankhamun die of natural causes, or is the explanation something more sinister? In 1968, a second autopsy was conducted. This time, X-rays were taken of the young king's skull. The X-rays showed a thin splinter of bone in his head. Rumours abounded that Tutankhamun was killed by a murderous blow to the back of his head. But others argued that there was no way of telling whether the chip occurred before or after death. Most recently, in 2005, CAT scans of the king's mummy were taken. The 3-dimensional scans show conclusively that Tutankhamun was not killed by a blow to the head, but they did reveal a broken leg. If this injury occurred before his death, it is possible that Tutankhamun died from an infected wound. Unfortunately, scientists disagree about whether this injury was sustained while the king was alive or during the first autopsy. So, despite ongoing investigations, the cause of the death of the young king remains unsolved. Unwrapped the body of the king of Tutankhamun. Lord Carnarvon shown here relaxing at Carter's house in Luxor. He had been ill for many years before he died of pneumonia. The mummy's curse. A number of strange deaths followed the opening of Tutankhamun's tomb, fueling rumours that a mummy's curse had been unlocked. The first death was that of Lord Carnarvon, who died 6 months after the opening of the tomb. A very strange incident indeed. Carnarvon died of an infected mosquito bite that later became pneumonia. Mysteriously, at the moment of Carnarvon's death, all the lights went out in Cairo, and, apparently in faraway London, Carnarvon's dog howled pitifully before dropping dead on the spot. But the story of the mummy's curse doesn't end there. 5 Europeans and many local Egyptians involved in the excavation died soon after the opening of the tomb. Howard Carter, however, lived another 17 years after the discovery, dying at age 64. Was there a mummy's curse, or was this chain of events just a coincidence? The truth remains veiled in mystery. Howard Carter's legacy. When the tomb was first opened, Carnarvon predicted Carter would be busy for a few weeks. In fact, it would take Carter and his team more than 10 years to remove the treasures from the tomb. The announcement of the 1922 discovery had brought the world's press to the Valley of the Kings, and they had eagerly camped outside the tomb, waiting for the treasures to be removed. But Carter refused to be hurried. With the same focus and determination that drove him while searching for the tomb, he and his team carefully examined, illustrated, rebuilt, restored, catalogued, and finally removed the treasures. In fact, Carter would devote the rest of his life to this great task. By discovering the tomb, Carter made the name Tutankhamun world famous. By lovingly restoring the treasures for future generations, he gave the king the one thing all ancient Egyptians hoped to achieve: a life after death. The great archaeologist Howard Carter died on the 2nd of March 1939 at the age of 64. His great legacy was remembered in an obituary that appeared in the Times newspaper. And that's the death mask. And that's the end of this book. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed. Bye.